Let's step into a scorched Nevada salvage yard, packed with what looked like worthless supercars. The crowd mocked what they could not see. A single dad buying a mangled McLaren for $1,500. They only saw a pile of scrap, crushed carbon and shattered aluminum. To everyone else, the scratched-out VIN plate meant a worthless write-off. An engine ruined by fire, the bidders mocked it as overpriced worthless scrap. But the blind crowd missed it when he crouched down and discovered one tiny secret hidden under that burned-out carbon frame. His face changed. He realized this specific supercar was never supposed to exist in public. If you and I love a story where hidden secrets refuse to stay buried, stay tuned, because what he found in that burned wreckage changed absolutely everything. At 27, Hunter Walker knew how to hide his genius and just survive. He stood 6'2", broad across the shoulders, with close-cropped brown hair, and a face that could have been handsome if sheer exhaustion had not carved deep lines around his eyes. He worked 6 days a week at a restoration auto shop in West Phoenix, Arizona, turning wrenches on beat-up European sedans for pennies, barely paying rent on the small house shared with his 6-year-old daughter, Madison. His garage always reeked of harsh solvents and old rubber, and his hands stayed stained with black grease no soap could ever wash away. First man in, last out. He stayed quiet, keeping his distance from other mechanics. He always kept a blue inhaler tucked in his pocket. Madison had mild asthma, so he made sure it was always within reach no matter what. His coworkers knew he possessed an incredible gift for composites, far better than anyone else there. They also knew he had spent time working in England. They did not understand his genius at all. To them, he was just a quiet, average mechanic. Little Madison was quite small for her age. She had sharp brown eyes that noticed everything, always dragging a beat-up picture book about racing cars to the dinner table. She owned just one photograph she truly treasured. It showed her dad standing at a professional motorsport facility. In England, he was standing next to a covered shape with the low, unmistakable stance of a supercar. She had no idea what kind of supercar it was, only that her dad looked totally different back then, younger, lighter somehow, as if the heavy burden he carried now had not crushed his shoulders yet. She hid that photo in her backpack, sometimes begging him to explain what it meant. Hunter would just stare at the image, mumble something vague, and quickly change the subject. You see, he kept a locked metal box hidden above his home workbench. Inside it sat 3 highly secret items. McLaren engineering badge from a secret facility the public never knew existed. Hand-drawn aerodynamic sketches on graph paper covered in the exact math of an expert stress analyst. And a grainy photograph of a secret chassis hidden under a tarp rolling through a dark loading bay. He kept these priceless secrets completely hidden from a blind, mocking world. Let's take a closer look. After Madison fell asleep, he would carefully open that box. He would study those priceless items, lock them away, and go back to the cheap repair work he brought home. The world always misses true greatness. Those mechanics just assumed he was an average European auto tech. Honestly, to them it was just trash. But people laugh at what they don't understand. You and I will see the secret they missed. The salvage auction went down on a Thursday in early October at a dusty yard right outside Henderson, Nevada. Insurance firms were dumping a massive batch of wrecked supercars, smashed Ferraris and a Lamborghini that ate a concrete barrier at 80 miles per hour, plus a couple of flooded Porsches pulled straight from California. The yard drew a swarm of arrogant dealers and flippers, and hungry brokers hustling the scrapyard circuit all the way from Vegas to Los Angeles. But Hunter, a desperate single dad, drove overnight from Phoenix in a beat-up truck. He got 4 hours of sleep at a cheap motel, hitting the yard before gates opened. He had spotted the online salvage listing exactly 3 days ago. One specific listing made him freeze, set down his coffee, and stare in disbelief. Then Evelyn Carter arrived in a sleek black SUV. Dark windows. She stepped out looking like high society elite who had never bought a single thing at a dirty salvage auction before. At 26, with sharp eyes behind rimless glasses, she was dressed in a tailored coat and turtleneck, completely ignoring the brutal Nevada heat. She managed a massive investment fund focused solely on high-value, historic classic cars. The kind of heavy-hitting fund where one quick phone call could move several $1 million in a single afternoon. She brought two highly paid experts to inspect the damage and history. They walked the yard like snobs, snapping photos and instantly dismissing everything. Evelyn barely spoke, merely pointing her finger and typing quiet notes into a fancy leather-bound device. She glanced at Hunter like he was just invisible, cheap background furniture. Zero interest, totally clueless about what he had actually found. Now look at what they mocked. Around noon, the ruined McLaren rolled out, lacking wheels to even stand on. The scale of the destruction was absolutely staggering. The entire front end had been slammed violently backward in a massive crash, crushing the entire nose structure into something resembling a crumpled soda can rather than a multi-million-dollar supercar. It had no windshield, no doors, no interior, just the scorched bones of a seat and a melted steering column. The ultra-expensive carbon fiber side panels were burned to dull gray, peeling apart in massive, ugly sheets. Someone had deliberately ground the serial number right off the chassis. Or at least, that is what the blind crowd assumed the fire did. Arrogant dealers circled the wreck like roadkill, curious, endlessly amused but keeping their distance. One heavy-set autobroker in a Stetson loudly declared it was only good for scrap metal, dismissing it as junk. Another dealer laughed, claiming the carbon was totally useless, but we know he was dead wrong. A guy in the back shouted out that you literally couldn't pay anyone to haul away that scrap. Mocking the useless scrap, the auctioneer opened bidding at $500. The bidding crept to $800, stalled at $1,000, then hit $1,200 before the room fell dead quiet. Hunter had not spoken a single word. He crouched by the charred wreck for 4 minutes, tilting his head in ways the clueless crowd found totally ridiculous. He was closely studying the burned weave pattern in the surviving carbon fiber panels. He carefully noted how the intake sat right against the monocoque center line. He slowly traced with a single finger along the geometry of the rear subframe where it met the tub. At $1,200, he finally stood up straight and quietly bid $1,500. The crowd erupted into loud, mocking laughter. Some guy up front joked about a single dad throwing his money at firewood. Evelyn Carter stared across the lot at Hunter with a look of pure, cold, unhurried judgment, deciding if he was totally delusional or just stupid, and then she spoke. Her voice carried clearly, telling him he just bought the most expensive piece of garbage in the yard. Hunter did not even react. He just watched the transport dolly roll past, heading toward the back holding area. As the burned shell passed at arm's length, he finally saw it, almost completely hidden under the blistered top layer of burnt carbon fiber. People laugh at what they do not understand, but this tiny detail meant everything to a former technician from Woking, England. It was a stenciled code. 2 letters, 2 numbers, P17. His pulse began racing in a way it had not done in years. There is a highly specific kind of memory, one that does not just sit in your brain like a regular, everyday thought. Instead, it lives deep down in your nervous system, burned into the body after doing intense, highly skilled hands-on work for a massive chunk of your life. Hunter Walker was only 22 years old when he first joined the McLaren composite development team as a junior technician, fresh out of a vocational engineering program over in Bristol. They recruited the young father for his brilliant spatial reasoning and his highly unusual, deep knowledge of how carbon fiber acts under extreme thermal and mechanical stress. You and I know the shiny Woking factory from magazines, but he worked somewhere else entirely. A much smaller facility, heavily guarded and kept completely hidden from the outside world, where an elite team of maybe 30 top engineers built secret hypercar prototypes that the press never heard about. Not the shareholders, and definitely no one outside the tiny, lockdown project team. The highly classified program Hunter was assigned to lacked a commercial name. Inside it was called XP17. That code meant it belonged to a highly rare line of experimental chassis platforms McLaren was quietly testing. The goal was a hypercar that crushed the famous P1, starting with a much lighter overall mass. A completely redesigned hybrid architecture designed to slash the thermal load on the battery during extreme high-performance driving. Plus a custom carbon tub built using secret layering techniques that his old composites team, including Hunter himself, had spent 2 years secretly developing. Let them laugh. They saw worthless scrap He saw a secret hypercar never meant to be found. To everyone else it was trash, to him a rare engineering prototype, packing million-dollar tech meant for sports cars 5 to 7 years later. Only 2 complete chassis were ever built. The mocking town had no clue Hunter built them both. He ran stress tests on the tubs and suspension pickup points, logging secret data on internal servers, completely forbidden from taking those spreadsheets outside the high-security facility. Then the secret program was suddenly killed. It followed a violent night test crash at a private English track. They simply did not understand the risks. Corporate lawyers and public relations teams quickly buried every detail of that wreck. Hunter and his engineering team were barely told anything at all, only that the test car was completely destroyed. The project was paused for review and their jobs were quietly reassigned. 8 weeks later, Hunter's contract was terminated. No real explanation was given, just a vague restructuring of the composites division. His United Kingdom work visa expired soon after, since it was tied directly to the job. At the time, he was dating a woman named Claire. She got pregnant, despite always swearing she would absolutely never raise a child outside the United Kingdom without Hunter having stable residency. When baby Madison was 3 months old, Hunter was back in America, completely jobless. Broke and without a future, Claire simply stopped answering his calls altogether. Neighbors mocked the single dad, but he survived in Phoenix for 4 years. When he thought about England at night, he was not actually bitter. He just felt the heavy, crushing regret of a man who touched greatness only to watch the door slam shut in his face without ever knowing why. Let us step inside the cheap, dusty garage he rented for his projects. A cramped, dirty bay in a shared industrial park near Tempe, staring right at the $1,500 wreck resting on a rented dolly. He whispered softly to the empty room, "There is no way you are still here." Dismantling that joke of a car took him 2 long weekends. Hunter just focused, peeling away the charred carbon panels with the delicate care of someone handling priceless artifacts instead of charred, useless garbage. Under that scrap lay real structure. Shielded by the outer shell, the inner tub survived the fire, remaining intact enough to read clearly. Hunter pulled his old engineering tools from storage, including a fiber optic scope, a portable ultraviolet light, and a laptop running the exact design software he used 5 years ago. What he uncovered beneath that ruined shell confirmed the $1 million secret he suspected the moment he saw that carbon weave at auction. This custom subframe geometry did not match any street-legal McLaren, which meant the automaker had never sold this design to anyone. Its rear suspension used custom titanium lattice inserts manufactured with a secret method the automaker kept completely hidden from the outside world. The highly specific mounting layout for that rear cooling system, even though it was completely destroyed, proved this was no mere scrap pile. He had found a $1 million phantom car never meant for the public. People naturally mock what they cannot understand. Hunter brought his discoveries to his local garage anyway. They just laughed, giving him the exact reaction he expected yet deeply feared. Take their senior technician, Ray. Ray was a good guy who had fixed European imports for 30 years, valuing brutal honesty above all. He told Hunter flat out that prototype McLaren supercars simply did not show up at Nevada insurance salvage auctions for $1,500. If this was a true prototype, the factory would have claimed it long before it ever hit a public auction. One younger mechanic put it even more bluntly, "Hunter, you bought a burned-out McLaren, and you are telling yourself a fantasy." Hunter ignored their doubts and went straight back to studying his prize. 2 weeks later, Evelyn Carter pulled up to the industrial park. She was there to collect some Porsche parts she had won from a different lot at that exact same auction. Walking past his open garage door, she caught sight of him working and stopped dead in her tracks. He had the McLaren's rear subframe flipped over on a workbench, documenting every weld under a bright magnifying lamp. Evelyn just stood there in the doorway, staring in silence, looking from the charred pile of junk to the man working on it. She spoke with a voice dripping with pure, absolute contempt. She mocked his desperate hope of turning a piece of trash into a lottery ticket. Hunter gave her a quick glance, said nothing, and went right back to photographing welds. She stared at him for 10 tense seconds. Then she walked away, Soon Madison began spending time at the garage on Saturday afternoons, doing her schoolwork on a folding chair with some juice while her father labored. She had already asked him twice what the ruined car really was and why it was so important. Hunter gave her the simplest answer he could, explaining his belief that this wreck was incredibly rare, something all the doubters missed entirely. The second time she asked, she looked at him with serious dark eyes and asked softly, "Daddy, if the car is really special, what happens?" Hunter paused, looking down at his little girl for a long moment before replying. He said, "Then maybe this is our last real shot at something better." He spoke softly without explaining. Madison simply nodded. We know kids often see what blind adults miss, and she understood the stakes. Hunter obsessed over decoding that serial number for 3 straight weeks. The XP17 marking he originally found, buried beneath the carbon, was a huge clue, but skeptics would demand absolute, undeniable proof. What he really needed was the laser-etched chassis serial number, a unique mark McLaren applied only to their prototype XP17 frames. It was carved so deeply that it only showed under ultraviolet light on raw carbon. This tedious technique was used on fewer than 12 cars ever produced at that secret facility. But the extreme fire and crash damage had ruined massive sections, leaving the serial number badly fractured. He could only see fragments. "Stick with me here." He saw enough to believe, but confirming the full sequence required meticulous reconstruction. He spent long nights at the kitchen table, after Madison fell asleep, quietly piecing together the carbon fiber details all by himself. Hunter compared the UV scans against his own memories of the factory, the old blueprint standards from his days in Woking. He was running entirely on memory and professional instinct, and the charred physical evidence sitting right before him. It all pointed to a massive secret that his rational mind desperately tried to dismiss. Meanwhile, the rent for his greasy workshop was 30 days overdue. His daughter Madison's prescriptions had skyrocketed in cost since summer ended. He was stretching her refills much further than any doctor would advise. The landlord even left a nasty note asking when his pathetic wreck was leaving. He stared at the note, then folded it. He shoved it in his pocket and went right back to work on the chassis. He had contacted 6 former colleagues from the composites industry back in England. 5 completely ignored him, likely laughing. But one veteran structural engineer named George Calloway had worked at the lab before him. He had retired to a village in Shropshire, but replied at 11 the next morning. Hunter sent George a highly selective set of photos. Nothing showing the scorched car's location or even his own name. Only the specific structural details and carbon weave patterns, partial serial numbers, and the custom titanium lattice work. Then he finally slept. His phone rang at 12:40 in the morning. The glowing screen showed a British number he recognized immediately. He answered. George Calloway's face popped up on video, sitting in a pitch-black living room. The poor man looked like he had aged 5 years since Hunter last saw him. His face was pale, the exact color of old paper. He just sat in silence for a moment. Then he whispered, "Hunter, where on earth did you find it? You and I know people mock what they don't grasp." For 40 minutes, George shattered everything Hunter knew about the XP17 program. His $1,500 wreck was no simple development casualty. Its destruction had been deliberately staged. George was no junior technician when they destroyed the car. He was the senior structures lead, sitting in top-secret meetings Hunter never attended. Meetings where the final decision to terminate was reached. The whole program was framed as a simple engineering and budget failure. But the real heavy pressure actually came from outside the company. A private investment group that funded their early development capital had, over 18 months, completely shifted their greedy stance on this technology. The radical battery cooling architecture his XP17 team built was, by the time they killed his project, easily 10 years ahead of what any other competing car maker had. That technology was worth billions, but not inside a McLaren hypercar. But as intellectual property they could secretly extract and sell off if the original car vanished. The fiery crash was real, but their shady response to that accident. How violently fast they buried the entire program. How cleanly they wiped every single record from the accessible corporate databases. Hunter was just a joke to them. How they quietly fired his team, That was all completely managed. George had signed a strict NDA. It was so strict he never breathed a single word of the secret. But George was talking to him now, past 1 a.m. UK time. Because he sent George a photo of scrap metal everyone claimed was completely destroyed. They crushed the first XP-17 chassis right at their factory. That part was fully documented. But the second chassis? The one that barely got scratched in that infamous night wreck? It got secretly loaded up into a shipping container in Southampton, hiding behind a completely fake manifest. They labeled his so-called junk as busted auto tools shipping back to an American supplier. That exact shipping crate finally reached the Los Angeles port, getting tossed onto a freight truck heading further inland. Deep in the Nevada desert, that transport truck crashed in a wreck. The whole container got locked down by the insurance firm handling that massive freight claim. George lost the trail there, assuming the wrecked car had simply vanished. He spent 4.5 long years believing that exact lie. Picture this: he sat in his dark garage at 1:15 a.m., gripping his phone, staring at the laughingstock wreck he'd just bought. He finally realized the shady corporate group that suddenly killed the XP-17 project, the parent company that bullied everyone involved, stole the custom tech and forced everyone silent, was the exact same outfit hiding behind a fake name that bankrolled the auto investment fund Evelyn Carter was running right now. He hesitated hard when he first spotted this wild financial link, since it felt exactly like the wild theory some desperate broke dad makes up just to feel slightly sane. But stick with me here, the paper trail was public if we knew what we were looking for, tracking the original startup names through endless corporate buyouts and restructurings. Evelyn had started her own secret internal snooping 2 days after seeing his supposedly useless scrap car. She went into work and dug up ancient files on her fund's parent company. Dusty records from way before she arrived, before they hired her to manage their auto portfolio as a harmless, 23-year-old genius they thought was smart but easily manipulated. What she uncovered, or rather, what was completely wiped away, shook her to her absolute core. Mentions of an XP development initiative popped up in old buried budget logs, always shoved into a folder marked for dead programs, always linked to a locked legal file way above her current security clearance level. The actual name XP-17 was wiped entirely from their active database. It was deleted with a surgical precision that screamed cover-up, not routine filing. She didn't call him right away. She had to figure out what massive lie she was trapped in before taking action. But she finally stopped thinking he was a delusional joke. They all laughed, but this mystery changed how she saw everything. 3 days later, the mocked father arrived at 7 in the morning. His garage was wide open. The heavy padlock was completely sheared off. But we know better. Inside, that $1,500 scrap had actually been moved. Not far, but enough to prove someone was hunting through his worthless junk. The portable hard drive that held his critical UV scans and reconstructed serial numbers vanished from the shelf right by his desk. He froze in the doorway for a full minute. Then he stepped inside to check his mocked project. His tools were untouched. The charred carbon tub was still there. The absolute most critical evidence. Those titanium inserts and monocoque panels holding the hidden serial numbers were ignored, just like the world the thieves saw scrap, not a masterpiece. Panicking, he called Madison school to make sure she arrived safely. She was safe. He drove there anyway, sitting in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching the doors before he let himself feel anything but pure survival instinct. Later that evening, he picked her up and they headed home. Madison revealed she still had his old backup data tablet, the device he mainly used to stream movies, the one he completely forgot she borrowed 2 weeks ago to watch cartoons in his car. She kept it safe in her backpack. She took it home from the garage last Saturday and forgot to return it. Right there, inside the photo folder that auto-synced with his scanner, was a perfect copy of every UV scan he ran before the thieves struck. He held her tightly for a long time, saying nothing. She never even asked why. That night, working on the tablet, he restored all the backup data to his laptop. Hunter spotted something he couldn't see clearly before in the damaged parts of his scans. Deep within those files recovered from the autosync, One UV image revealed a hidden secondary mark stamped on the carbon tub, a mark that was definitely not a standard serial number. It was a rare production sequence stamp from early assembly. The stamp was faded, but it was enough. Matched against George Calloway's detailed 2 chassis build sequence records, it proved this pile of scrap was the legendary second XP-17 chassis. The lost container car, the exact machine the world dismissed as missing forever. He also noticed something else while reviewing old files he'd saved from his private engineering sessions at the facility years ago. Saved to a forgotten cloud drive, sitting right there was a short video clip. A coworker casually recorded it during a daytime track testing session, and it ended up in a group chat that Hunter saved years ago without thinking. That missing clip was 47 seconds long. It showed a low-profile prototype supercar tearing through a corner on a private track. What we see there proves this mocked father found an engineering ghost worth millions. Let's look closer. That charred bodywork actually shifted shape during the corner. Look at that hidden active arrow. It reacted instantly, doing things those clueless skeptics could never have imagined back then. But more importantly for Hunter's mission, the video clip played just long enough for the chassis code on the doorsill to stay in frame for 4 seconds. It matched the partial serial number on his carbon tub. Evelyn arrived, bypassing her investment fund entirely without any lawyers or corporate suits. She showed up completely alone in casual clothes at 8 on a Tuesday night, and quietly knocked on the door of his rundown garage. Hunter pulled the door open, letting her inside without a word. She stared at the supercar, which by this point was stripped down enough that its million-dollar engineering was obvious to anyone who truly understood cars. She examined the workbench where Hunter had laid out his undeniable proof. Then she finally looked at him and admitted something that deeply bruised her pride. She quietly confessed that he was right. Hunter silently studied her for a moment, then bluntly asked for her next move. She pleaded for more time, but he bluntly told her he had none left. A heavy legal threat had just arrived at the garage. 3 days ago, a mysterious corporate firm demanded he completely hand over the machine, claiming his priceless find was actually their stolen, highly classified prototype. For now, he was completely ignoring their empty threats. Stick with me here. Those next 3 weeks became their greatest partnership ever. Evelyn used her elite corporate clearance to retrieve ancient shipping logs from long before she joined that massive investment fund. The lost Southampton shipping manifest was buried right there inside a freight log owned by a dead subsidiary absorbed by the parent firm 7 years ago. It proved a covert delivery of high-end prototype parts headed straight to a Nevada warehouse. The freight slip held a secret reference code that, when matched with George Calloway's memory and those faded, incomplete chassis numbers Hunter recovered, pointed directly to the legendary XP-17. The multi-million-dollar supercar actually shipped. It was left inside a container written off after a massive Nevada freight crash. Unaware of its value, authorities impounded it and dumped it into a salvage auction 3 years later as an unverified, worthless heap of metal. The corporate legal pressure soon skyrocketed. Hunter spotted a black SUV idling near his home on 4 separate quiet mornings. He instantly changed his daughter Madison's daily route to school. He secretly moved the car's priceless prototype components to a private storage unit under a fake name he borrowed from Ray at the local shop. Madison, who was far too clever for her age, stared at him one evening while they were eating dinner, asking if those scary men outside wanted to steal his priceless McLaren. He promised her they wouldn't. You and I know he would never let them. Everyone saw a fool. She stared at her plate, asking if he was sure. He honestly told her he was working on it. Not a bad start for a laughingstock. Come with me inside. The verification took place at a private high-security Monterey facility. Sunny California, right in early December. Evelyn's elite network had gathered the ultimate skeptics. 3 legendary automotive historians and world-class appraisers. 2 veteran engineers who actually helped develop original McLaren prototypes. 1 reporter representing a highly respected automotive press magazine. Plus 4 representatives from elite collector and high-rolling investment groups. The mocked single father drove through the night, his daughter asleep in the back. Under his locked truck cover, hid the charred pieces of a $1,500 wreck. He had barely slept 5 hours a night during those 2 exhausting, grueling weeks. That room held decades of expert knowledge and enough cold, brutal skepticism to make you and me sweat. To them, the charred shell was a joke before he even opened his mouth. But Hunter calmly walked them through the monocoque tub geometry. He showed the carbon weave, proving it matched 0 known production cars. He mapped the laser serial, linking it to the second XP17 prototype chassis. He traced that titanium structure directly back to McLaren's highly classified development files. Then he played the video, proving the matching chassis identity. He spoke like a master engineer presenting a highly technical, serious debrief. No drama, completely precise, citing his sources. As he finally finished the presentation, he paused, reaching deep underneath the driver's side of that scorched tub. Only 3 weeks ago, he had discovered this hidden panel. It was a removable access cover, roughly the size of a standard novel. Fastened tight to the tub, no one would ever find it without ripping this wreck apart piece by piece. Against all odds, it survived the horrific crash and fire. Safe and sound, shielded deep inside the carbon monocoque's armored interior frame. Tucked behind it, locked directly to the inner panel with 2 tiny bolts, lay a machined titanium plate, roughly 12 centimeters wide by 6 centimeters tall. Engraved right onto the metal with hand-applied precision tooling. Read these vindicating words, XP17 experimental prototype, followed by a 2-digit code proving the exact build sequence, next to a McLaren facility code that George Calloway swore was an exact match to their highly classified secret development site during its final days. The room went completely silent for several seconds, then absolute chaos erupted. A prominent former director of technical programs from McLaren itself, Evelyn Carter, now retired and working as an elite consultant for massive museum collections, stood up and confirmed the titanium plaque format and facility code were an exact match to the highly classified documentation process he had personally overseen. He spoke with absolute caution, choosing words he knew would echo. This car was never authorized for public disclosure. That was all he even bothered saying. It was more than enough. The massive media storm began that very evening. It was written by the journalist who watched the crowd mock him. Her report went live within 3 hours of the auction. You and I know how the internet works. By morning, his scrap metal story flooded every blog. The headlines evolved, but his $1 million secret remained unchanged. A lost McLaren hypercar prototype, loaded with next-generation tech light years ahead of its time. Found in a dusty Nevada junkyard by the one technician who actually helped build it, buying his masterpiece for $1,500. The automaker panicked, firing off a massive offer within 72 hours of the news. Their buyout offer was massive and incredibly thorough. They demanded the supercar, plus every shred of data this so-called fool had gathered. An ironclad gag order to bury the entire XP17 project forever, plus a fortune in hush money that would have changed this single father's life, wiping away his financial struggles forever. He studied the contract right where his daughter did her homework every single night. And he just sat there in the quiet, thinking. Evelyn, the skeptical appraiser, showed up the very next day. Sitting in that same kitchen, she finally admitted what she had been too proud to say. She confessed she went to that auction, believing she knew exactly how the world worked. And she assumed she knew the difference between true genius and a delusional joke, between a brilliant investment and a completely ridiculous pipe dream. But people mock what they cannot grasp. She completely underestimated Hunter. She confessed she had spent her whole career searching for hidden value, yet she stared at this struggling father and instantly wrote him off, realizing she had mocked a genius whose mind she simply could not comprehend. Hunter just listened. He let her finish, then asked if she would sign the gag order. She refused. That evening, little Madison fell asleep right across her father's lap in the garage. Her schoolbook tossed aside, breathing soft and perfectly steady. Hunter sat there in the dim light, his hand gently cradling his daughter, staring at the old locked box on the shelf. The worn badge, the blueprints, his secret supercar hidden under a tarp. He realized what it meant to carry this heavy secret for 4 long years, never explaining to the mockers why he clung to what they called junk. He considered what cashing out really meant, taking their millions and letting his masterpiece vanish behind corporate locked doors forever. But let's look at the alternative. It was far less certain. He pictured Madison looking up, asking if his scrap car really mattered. He remembered the promise he had made to his little girl. So he grabbed their massive buyout offer, studied the numbers, and slapped it face down on his greasy workbench. He threw their gag order away. He hired his own attorney. A fierce Scottsdale patent attorney saw the viral story, recognized his brilliant secret, called him, and drafted a powerful counteroffer. The restored masterpiece and all the proof would be transferred to a nonprofit museum trust demanding full public display rights, and that massive payout cleared his legal bills and debts. The laughing skeptics fell dead silent. The whole truth behind that legendary XP-17 prototype. Every detail, including its sudden cancellation, finally went public. The secret technology, like its battery cooling setup, its active aerodynamics, were already locked away deep inside a corporate patent portfolio. Untangling that corporate legal web would take years to resolve. But his million-dollar truth couldn't be buried. Fast forward 1 year. The supposedly worthless McLaren sat behind museum glass inside an elite California car foundation. Beautifully restored, it showcased the genius engineering that the entire world had missed. The carbon tub sat exposed, while soft lighting highlighted the masterclass titanium latticework. A sleek metal plaque stood on a pedestal nearby. The display card proudly announced this rare supercar's true identity, its secret build date and true racing purpose. We both know the wild path from an English factory to a trash yard to a museum. He ran his own elite performance shop now, restoring rare classics, proving to every foolish skeptic that his vision was right. 2 major museums had already reached out, desperate for his genius to decode misidentified collector cars. And he took the job. He even lectured on advanced carbon fiber stress analysis in historic car restorations, sharing his secrets on authenticating forgotten multi-million-dollar prototypes. He absolutely hated being in the spotlight. But true experts command the room naturally once they have the proof, letting nothing but cold, undeniable facts silence the doubters. Evelyn quit that blind investment firm just 4 months after the story broke, tired of their short-sighted corporate greed. She walked away to build something with real, lasting integrity. She partnered with him to launch an elite automotive heritage fund, uncovering forgotten treasures that the blind mainstream world had thrown away. On a crisp October Saturday, just 13 months after that fateful auction, he proudly brought his daughter to the museum. She was 7 years old. Inheriting his sharp focus, she already looked down on the blind world. They stood silently together in front of the glass display. Look closely here. The car was still scarred, but the raw restoration proudly exposed its priceless truth. The little girl stood quietly, studying her father's masterwork for a long time. Finally, she looked up at him with curious eyes and asked, "Daddy, did they finally believe you?" He looked at the supercar that started as a joke, a pile of charred scrap. A masterpiece hiding its million-dollar secret deep. Far too deep for those laughing fools to see. It had waited for someone to finally see past the rust. Armed with pure brilliance and absolute stubbornness. We both know he won. He smiled and said, "It doesn't matter when they believed. What matters is I never stopped working." She pondered his words, gazing at the rebuilt supercar. You could see his daughter locking that powerful lesson away. Kids do that. They store up wisdom knowing they will eventually face a blind world that mocks anything it cannot understand. Hunter stood silently by her side in that quiet garage. No words were needed because his restored million-dollar masterpiece silenced every single doubter. Sometimes the exact thing a crowd ridicules as worthless scrap is just waiting for a visionary who ignores their jeers. A father with the vision to see a masterpiece hidden beneath the ashes. And perhaps he kept the key to his triumph locked inside a heavy toolbox for 4 years, waiting to expose the world's blind ignorance. Again.